Okay, so let's just then get started.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so let me do the formal stuff. All right, so to all the audience of this podcast, thanks a lot and welcome aboard for this conversation today. I'm Dhavala. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Technical University of Munich. And with me is Naman Jain. He is a doctoral research student at Max Planck Institute for Quantum Optics, which is also based in Munich. So both of us today will be hosting Vini Gautam, who is a professor who has joined IISc recently. In this series, we'll be talking to women scientists and educationalists in the community who have contributed a lot either to science or education, and they have a story to share with us. And the idea is that whoever is listening to this podcast, and if you think you want to pursue science as a career, then you can surely do it. And most of the time, we lack guidance. And the idea of this podcast is that experiences of the people with whom we talk can be a kind of guidelines for us to make informed decisions at various points in life. So today we are talking to Vini Gautam. She is an expert in several things, in fact, and it spreads over physics, neurosciences, biology, and maybe even more, which I don't know. So she's a faculty member at IISc, before which she was at University of Melbourne and Australian National University. She did her PhD and Masters from Jawaharlal Nehru Centre for Advanced Scientific Research, which is based in Bangalore. And her work is really very different because it combines aspects of different fields and puts them together. And it's truly holistic in approach. Let's see. So we are really happy to have with her, with us, and thanks a lot, Vini, for your time. And let's talk to her and figure out more about what she has to say.
Thank you so much, Dhavala, for having me, and thanks, Naman, for this initiative and for inviting me for this conversation.
So just to start with something which I have in mind is about your childhood and the atmosphere in which you grew. Was it? Can you tell us about it? Where are you from, and how did your interests in science kind of begin?
Sure. So I come from Delhi. My parents are based in Delhi still, and I have one sibling. He's a younger brother. He's 2 years younger to me, and we both went to the same school. And I had I think a lot of families, they have this educational difference between girls and boys, and how girls and boys are raised differently. In my family, I was very lucky. I was raised, I never felt that there is a difference in how me and my brother are being raised, or in terms of our education or anything. And interestingly, okay, so I think you asked me about the love for science. I think it just came. So I was the first person in my family to actually say that I want to take up science, or science is my favorite subject. There was nobody before me who studied science as such. So I was the first person. At that stage, I thought I'm the first person, as you can understand from my language. But later on, I realized that being the first girl to actually study science and do the first bachelor's degree in science, master's in science, and the first girl to do a PhD as well. I was the first one to do a PhD as well in my family. So that was really good. The interesting part was that I did not even realize that there is a bias towards girls in terms of the numbers that the numbers fall if you're a female as you go up in your career in science. I never realized it until I actually went beyond my PhD. So even during my PhD, I did not realize that there are issues there in STEM fields, that there are lesser women role models and so on. I only realized it after I went overseas.
So in general, like your schooling, do you remember, or sort of do you associate your interests to do with some good teachers or sort of activities in school that drove you towards science? Because typically the the mentality is more towards engineering or medicine. But then it
Oh,
takes a bit
yes.
of extra thought to actually say that, look, I'll do science. And
Okay, yes. So definitely what I enjoyed the most in my 11th and 12th standard were the experiments. So we had really good teachers who were labs were really good. We had really good lab work. And that was I always found it very exciting because it was very hands-on. It was not about sitting in the classroom and just a series of things that you're learning, for example. It was really, you go out and whatever you've learned, you sort of apply in the lab. So in terms of the schooling, that lab aspect I really enjoyed. And I had physics, chemistry, maths, and biology. I had all the science subjects with me. So with the labs, with the physics, chemistry, and biology labs, I really enjoyed. And then of course afterwards, typical Indian style is after your 12th standard, you give an engineering exam and you give a medical exam. So for me, what happened was engineering, according to my family, was not for girls. It is
that's
mainly for
interesting.
boys. And I could do medicine. But then what happened with medicine is I was not very comfortable about dissecting human bodies. I think that is what my scare was, that if I take medicine, I'm not going to be able to dissect human bodies ever. So what should I do? What can I do that actually keeps my excitement for labs and practicals going on? And then, I can still, yeah, and that's what motivated me to take a bachelor's in science. And from there, I just continued. So I did a bachelor's in science and physics, but then I always was interested in biology. I always wanted a more multidisciplinary flavor in my studies. So I opted many courses as my electives for biology. And then for my master's, I did my integrated PhD. When I joined my lab in JNCSR, I was very fortunate. My supervisor was, he gave all the freedom to choose the research project that I wanted to choose. So he gave us a nice exposure for the kind of projects that were going on in the lab, and then the freedom to develop your own research question. And that's where I jumped from photovoltaics, optoelectronics, and their application to the neurosciences.
So although you were doing a BSc in physics, you said you could still take courses in biology, or was it like, I mean,
Yeah,
how do
so
you, in your undergrad and masters, if someone wants to, if someone has similar thoughts as you, it could be two different subjects of whatever kind. Is it like they do a physics BSc and then do the other thing on their own, or does the college typically support these kind of multi-subject courses?
So in my degree, I can speak for my major was in physics, but there were elective courses like minor courses like biophysics, for example, that were offered as part of the major degree. So I made sure that I had biophysics in all the 3 years of my degree, and so on. And then for the master's degree, I think, for example, in IISc also, we have a lot of freedom for students to take the courses that they want. So there are always going to be some core courses that you have to take for your master's specialization, but you can always take electives. So what I did for my master's degree was I took electives. So for my degrees is in JNCSR, I was studying material science. That was my degree. But I did neuroscience courses in IISc for 2 years, for 2 semesters.
Okay.
So I would come to IISc and do those as electives. Sometimes you can also audit those courses only and not credit. So what I did was in one semester I audited one course, and another semester I credited it as well. So the universities sometimes acknowledge other courses in other universities that you can bring in those grades. But a lot of students I know, what they do is they audit their courses.
So the basic bottom line is that if you are doing a bachelor's or master's in any subject, then you could still explore something else as well, provided you're in the right institution. That's one thing. And if you're not part of IISc or JNC, these elite institutions, if you're in some university, perhaps there are still courses that you could take and do some of your own studies. Is that the way to go about, or
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think a lot of students probably would be in shoes where they're not sure what they want to do after their bachelor's. They're not sure what you want to do after your even 12th standard, and it's very normal. First of all, I would want to say, like, it's very normal. Like, in my case, engineering and medicine is out. And what do? I just took physics. But then I made sure that I'm, still studying other subjects. So that gives you an opportunity to still explore what your real interests are. Right, and there is and also in current world there are a lot of online courses available, like Udemy is there and Coursera is there. So if anything interests you, I would highly encourage students to take those courses and keep exploring what really interests you, because a career in something that really interests you and motivates you is going to be the most beneficial and most enjoyable career. So explore your interests as much as possible. There are, and I think there was a dialogue in one of the movies, right? Knowledge to sab jagah bat rahi hai, kahin bhi jaake le lo, isn't it? So
yeah.
there are a lot of
Yeah. So I think it's a very what interests me about you is that it was quite an early interest which you never let it go and you stuck to it. Most of the times, people I have met people who are engineers and in the corporate world, and they say that, and they tell me that I liked physics so much, but somehow I did something else, and they regret their lives. But it if you stick on to the subject that you like, then it's really possible to make your living also in that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and I think making a living for me, it has always been like, it's not just about money. I mean, it's also about what you enjoy day to day. Like I really get up. You get up and you're excited to go to work. You're excited about what you're going for the rest of the day, and that's very important. And I couldn't let it go. Like I could do a lot of other things. I'm good at a lot of other things, but I just could not let my research go. Could make living out of anything else.
So the other thing I want to touch upon in this part is, for especially since we are talking about bachelor's and master's level of studies, you have also done internships, which are again like interdisciplinary, I guess. I think no one pointed out to me that ek bar physics kar li, ek bar bio kar li. So
yeah, I mean, another point that I wanted to also ask about this was that, given that you mentioned that you were the first person in your family to sort of foray into science so far, so did that have any role to play, you think? Because I mean, of course, people who are seasoned enough know the ugly sides, the difficult sides, and so on, and that's one way to approach things. So that's very calculative, and you can sort of put your steps in the right places. The other way is to just put your steps and then discover, oh my god, this was difficult, but well, now it's in the past. So which was the case for you? And was this something that you kind of realized now, or was it also evident when you were going through?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually, Naman. Thanks for bringing that out. I think it was the second case for me, like, because there was nobody in my family to guide me. I was the first person going out. So it is like, facing the world by yourself, and you want to try different things and see what actually works for you. So that is what happened with me, for sure. I think I was just fortunate that my parents were very supportive in anything I wanted to do. They backed me up. The first time I was the first person who actually went out of the state to actually study, right? So I came to Bangalore, and for me, my parents, that was a big step for them to send their daughter to somewhere else, and in an unknown city with a new language, a new culture. Like, that was a very big step for me and my parents, but they always backed me up. So I think, and I'm sure there are a lot of students there who don't come from science families, and so the best thing is to do internships, different courses, see what you really want to, what interests you the most, and just carve a niche for yourself, carve your own path. When you don't have a path, you just make your own path.
Yeah, so it's so if I have to take away, it's more like sticking to your interests in your studies, and exploring through courses and also through internships, which quite a lot of us actually miss out. I mean, not everyone actually even knows that you can go for summer internships and find a spot. Or many a times, the complaint which I've heard from people in rural areas is that when they are from an unknown college or university, they don't even get a chance to go. But I think one has to just try.
Yes, I'm sure one just has to try. I think a lot of people are happy to host interns. Like I can speak from my recent experience in IISc. I am getting a lot of applications for internships. And although money is always a limiting factor in academia, some people may not be having the money to pay for your stay, cover for your, pay you a salary for internship or something. But if you're truly motivated, just go out there and just expose yourself to what is happening. And even if it's not as far from your house or something, there may be another university just close by. Even if you can go and help the PhD students out in another lab, in another professor's lab, that's going to be a valuable experience at a bachelor's level.
Interesting. So did you do these internships through some programs, or you figured out again on your own, or how did it happen?
So, so the NCBS internship that I did, that was an advertisement I saw in the newspaper, and I just applied for it. I have to say, so by the time, so that was through a newspaper advertisement for them. The physics internship that I did during my bachelor's, that was through a professor. He'd come to give a seminar in our course, in one of the courses. And he said that if any of you are interested in exposing yourself to a different kind of research, write to me. And that's what I did. And for example, I do a lot of that. I encourage students to write to me if they have any questions, if they have any, if they want to visit my lab. And sometimes students reply, but I think most of the time students have this, they are overwhelmed when a professor says that, when somebody senior comes to their university and says that. So I would probably suggest, don't be overwhelmed. If someone's welcoming you to visit their lab, just go and visit them. And you never know what opportunities open. So put yourself out there. It can be overwhelming, it can be daunting, but put yourself out there, talk to people from different fields, try to get their experiences, and just see what all opportunities are there, what you can do, and grab some of them.
So just raking up a little bit on this bachelor internship aspect. When you went down, you are doing an undergrad in a college, and then you go to a research lab. It's a completely different world, I should say. Do you have memories of your internship? Was it like you were super confident, you knew, or it was all easy peasy, or was it like, oops, where am I? Can you tell us about your experience first?
Yeah, I do have clear memories because that was my first internship in a physics lab. So that was a research institution, a completely total research institution. And my first impression was, wow, this is so exciting. That is what my impression was, right? So I actually felt that the labs, I was so impressed with the labs, compared to my college labs, the labs that we had, and then you go to a pure research institution, you do an internship, and I was just super excited. And so the more, I think I was lucky that I found a place that was so exciting for me. And that excitement just motivated me. You do want to do experiments. People were very nice, of course. The environment makes a very big difference as well. So the students were very nice. They were very helpful, and getting trained on a new equipment. And then the excitement was also that what you are doing is actually the first of its kind. So in research, I think that feeling of that nobody else in the world has done it, right? This is the first time. What you are doing is the first time you're doing it, and you are going to answer a question. You have a hypothesis and you are testing it. So for me, that always excites me. That what does it mean? What is it going to come? That unknown, that wonder feeling. I think I really enjoyed when I did my first internship.
So tell us about your research. Let's talk about what were the questions in very basic level. What were the questions that you asked during your PhD, let's say?
Okay, so for my PhD, I was in a photovoltaics lab, which everybody in my PhD lab was specialized, and my supervisor as well. They were specialized in making organic photo detectors, organic field effect transistors, and organic solar cells. So which means that you have these flexible displays. You can see these foldable phones are coming up now, and these curved televisions and everything, right? So it was a physics lab, and the research questions that they were asking were, what are these, for example, the transport characteristics. What kind of materials can we use for making these devices? If we change to this XYZ material, what are going to be the photovoltaic, can we make, for example, better solar cell, let's say. Can we make a better solar cell than it already exists? Or can we make a better transistor? And if we are making a better transistor with some other materials, what are the characteristics of that transistor, and so on, right? Now again, the kind of person that I am, I liked what they were doing, but I was not too sure if I wanted to do that pure physics research question. If I wanted to ask, okay, what I wanted to ask was, can we apply any of that work into some kind of biological application? Based on my past experience. So, and then I started, I was going around the PhD students. I tried to make my own devices as well, and for my master's degree. And then I thought, well, I can probably try to put them in aqueous media. Try to put them, what happens if these devices are put in salt solutions and so on, because our body is really made of salt solutions. So are they stable enough? So I started with that stability question. And when I started putting these devices into aqueous solutions or salt solutions, you can say saline, for example, I started putting them there and actually just characterizing these devices to see what are their electrical characteristics, right? And then I started picking up
excuse me, just a very naive question. So you make these transistors or your photovoltaic devices, and you were putting them in saline, but will it not just short circuit the whole thing? Or, I mean...
So the idea was to check the stability, right? So we would actually hold, so this is, let's say, a solar cell, or not even a solar cell. You basically have thin films. The idea is to check the stability of the material itself. So just see if they're putting in saline, what is the electrical characteristic? What do they still have any electrical signals at all or not? So you actually hold the water in a very tiny space and not on the contact pads, not just so hold it on the active area.
Okay, so if you have a transistor where there's source and drain somewhere in between, or you put a little bit of saline.
Just a tiny bit, yes. Okay, and then look at the signals, what happens if they are exposed to salt solution. And what I started getting were these signals which I found out in literature, which were very different. So I was still getting photovoltages, I was still getting optoelectronic signals, but they were very different to the normal device output. And then I started looking up, and so the time scale. So my supervisor asked me, can we make a detector out of it? Can we make a liquid based detector out of it? And then I realized that in a camera, there's a detector. Every day we see our cameras, right? They detect optical signals. In the camera, the signals are very, very fast. So we are talking about really small time scales. You want very quick pictures, you want very quick processing time and everything. But my signals were very slow. They were milliseconds time scale. So then it struck me that milliseconds time scale is where our body signals are. Our bodies have salts, and our body signals take place in milliseconds to sub-milliseconds time scale. We don't work in microseconds. So our body, all the electrical signals flowing in our body are milliseconds time scale. So that is when, that was probably the wonder point where I actually thought, well, my devices have electrical signals in response to light, and these electrical signals have a time scale of milliseconds. They look very similar to the kind of electrical signals we have in our body, in neurons, in the central nervous system. So what can I do, right? So what struck me was I can actually use these devices to stimulate blind retinas. So because in blindness, what people have lost is their ability to detect signals. So if I detect visual signals, so they cannot see light, but their brain and the neurons are still intact. Okay, so my device...
So only the cells in the retina have been damaged for some reason, is it?
Yes. Okay. In many retinal degenerative disorders, the blindness causes, in most of the blindness, what happens is only the retinal cells are damaged. but the connection between the retina and the brain are intact. So what struck me was, what my idea was, that I could use my devices to actually replace those degenerated retinal cells. So my devices would act like an artificial retina. They would sense the visual field, produce the electrical signal that is enough to stimulate the neurons for the brain, right? And that's basically what I did. So that I picked up that idea. I really wanted to test it. So it took a long time for me to do my first experiment, because I had never seen a retina before. So I had never seen a neuron before. Like, my hands-on experiments before had never dealt with real animals. So device-wise, I was okay. Now, for half of my PhD was making these devices. The other half was just not publishing anything, but just getting trained on extracting, neurons from animal brains. And the
So you
funny
did end
story,
up dissecting things in the end.
I did. And the
You're
funny thing was,
still not
yeah,
dissecting human body.
still not to human. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of steps for the human, and I'm not sure if I want to go there very soon, but animals is okay.
Okay.
The funny thing was, I asked my supervisor, this is what I want to do. So I think that's where your research supervisor is very important, the choice of your supervisor, right? So I asked my supervisor, this is what I want to do. And he clearly said, I have no background in biology, right? I don't know anything about neurons or anything, right? Nobody in my lab is going to supervise you on this, okay? But if you want to do it, it's an exciting idea, I will support you. And I think that was very important. Like, he could have said, this is a project, but I don't want to do it in my lab, right? But he did not. So I think that's where the choice of supervisor is very important as well. So choose your supervisors carefully, and have a chat with them. What is your and I was pretty clear. I really wanted to do it, and I proposed this project to him, and he was very excited about it. He thought this is worth doing in his lab. And he provided me the support. He asked me to go to different places. He put me in touch with a lot of other people he knew. He put me in touch with the what do you call this? The people who work with retinas, the doctors, ophthalmologists. Yeah, like those. He put me in touch with ophthalmologists. He sent me to veterinary hospitals to see, what a retina looks like. What does an eye look like? My the first eye I saw was of a cow. It was as big as a human eye, like it was this big. Right. Okay. And then I was asking the vet how you take out the retina. So it was very nice, the kind of exposure I got. But ultimately it was, me who had to drive it. And that was pretty clear that I would have to drive it. Of course, there is a lot of financial support that he provided as well, but I was very fortunate.
It's really amazing that one is you step into something which has never been done or thought of in the lab or even in the broader scheme of things, and then your boss is also like, okay, let's do this. It's crazy, but let's do this.
Let's do this, yeah. And and in retrospect, I think my PhD was very difficult. I published much lesser compared to my lot of other colleagues, because a lot of my time just went in learning a lot of things and setting up a new experimental setup in my lab, right? But at the end, I got a very nice high impact paper. And what I also got was a lot of experience in making a new setup, right? And I used it, that's a worthwhile experience. So when you go for your postdoc, you sort of have that opportunity to build your own setups. You feel very confident. Yeah. So I got an opportunity to build my own experimental setup, to create my own research hypothesis, to test my hypothesis, to do my own experiments the way I wanted to. I also got the opportunity to visit a lot of labs, just because my lab did not have that expertise, right? I visited many different kinds of labs because of that. So even though I got much fewer papers, but I got this very, very good experience that was very valuable.
So it's not necessary that you go to a well-established or well-set lab for your PhD, but you need to, what's more important is the advisor and his attitude or his or her attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my supervisor, for example, was a very well-established lab, but not in this area,
exactly,
right? And now, because my advisor was ready to get into this field, now he has a well-established that niche, that is one of the pillars of his lab now. That work is now, that setup, that work, PhD student, there are new PhD students who have taken up my work, and it's continuing.
So do other labs in India pursue these kind of things, or not at all?
Yeah, so coming back to India, one of my motivations after 9 years or 10 years that I've been away is again the reason that there are not many labs who do this kind of work in India. The kind of work that I'm trying to do falls into the area of prosthetics, right? So I'm trying to replace damaged parts of the human body, and that's basically what prosthetics does, right? So in my PhD was to replace a damaged retina or a blind retina. And now what I want to do is probably I want to target damaged circuits in the human brain. So see, not a lot of labs in India actually work in the area of prosthetics, at least for the central nervous system or for the peripheral nervous system. So I'm really excited to be back and to start my group. And actually one of the motivations is I actually want to train the next generation in this area. A lot of labs are doing traditional research and a lot of labs are doing very similar kind of work, but I really want to train next generation, in this interdisciplinary area where you actually have an expertise in both physics and biology.
So your PhD was in this retina using transistors, a concept of electronics or physics, basically, of photovoltaics. You merged it with the time scales that match in neuroscience, right? So just a small naive question is, your devices can be quite large, whereas the retina in reality, retinal cells are so tiny. Did you also work on miniaturization and such, ideas, or?
Yeah, so I tested my devices with real retinas from mice and rats, right? So we did pixelate our device. So if you pixelate your device and then yes, you're stimulating a few cells at a time, right? So that is another question, so because I'm doing this for the first time in India, not just in India, but even for the world, a lot of new questions came up, like how small should the electrodes be, as you are saying, or how big should the electrodes be? Is the kind of pixel that I had was still too big? And what is the light to electrical signal?
Yes.
What kind of profiles do you want, and what kind of or how large an area or how large a device do you want, right? So a lot of new questions open up when you actually do this first of its kind research, right? And then it's not necessary that you will finish everything in your PhD. That's another thing I want to point out today. That when you do this first of its kind work, it might take a long time, and then it's time that you have to finish your PhD, and that's okay. You don't have to stick around and finish all of that. You should train the next set of students, and they can take up those research questions and they can start answering those as well. And once these new questions come up, and then it's a field that is opened up.
So you actually so is it like you, how did you actually do it? Like, there's this retina of rat or mice.
Yes.
And then did you replace parts of the damaged area, or was it an entire retina, or how was it actually done?
So what we do is we actually work with models of animals which are blind. So you take these animals which are blind, which means their retinas still already don't have the ability to detect light. Okay, and instead of those cells, so what you do is you put the entire retina on top of your device, or you put your device on top of that blind retina. And then what you do is you record from the retinal neurons. So retina is a multi-layered structure actually. The first layer is what detects the light, and the last layer is what is the neurons that connect the retina to the brain. So what you do is you put your device on top of the degenerated layer or the blind, the damaged cell layer, have light, have a visual field, and record from the retinal neurons. So you pick up the signals from the retinal neurons. If the retinal neurons are, if the retina is truly blind, there will be no response to the retinal neurons in response to light. So if the light is on a blind retina, the retinal neurons will be silent. There will be no signal. But because of my device, what we were able to show was when the light was falling on the device was having electrical signals that stimulated the entire retina, and then the retinal neurons were actually active. They were firing action potentials.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the proof of concept that we can use photovoltaic materials as artificial photoreceptors.
Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, just going, it's amazing, and I mean, it looks almost like a fantasy to me, but you actually did it. I mean, I mean, I really admire this whole thought, and that too coming from a student, and not like, there's already a lab which does this, and you go and do this. It's really great. When it comes to fundamental sciences, you have physics here, you have neurosciences. What aspects of various fields do these problems connect?
Yeah, it definitely connects physics and the basic neuroscience, but this field of prosthetics and neurotechnology, as it's called now in these days, it actually brings together electronics, electrical engineering, material science, materials engineering. So it's a very multidisciplinary field, I should say.
So
And that is what.
So it must be quite amazing even for a material science perspective, right? Because you may need new and new materials, or sort of better and better materials for this efficiency of this action that happens.
Yeah, so as a material scientist, that is materials question is important. And then for electronics, you have to think, for example, what kind of, what is a better interface, electrical interface? How do you actually extract signals from the neurons? You have to build new circuits and new devices for new electrical, how do you pick up the electrical signals from the retina? How do you know that the retina is able to get stimulated and not? And then there is this whole imaging. So you can imagine that, you have to translate the visual field into an electrical field, right? So that is again a whole different computer software engineering question. How do you translate the visual field into electric field? And and then the neuroscience aspect is there. You don't want to have so much current or so much voltage is that the cells are all dead. So the biology question is, what is enough? Just enough to do its work, but not damaging a lot of natural pathways in biology, because our bodies have set pathways, they have plasticity and everything. How do we train them? So there's a lot of biology involved, cell biology, neuroscience, a lot of different aspects are involved there.
Nice. So it's quite rare that the research that we do actually matters to human life, and this is kind of one of those that I see, isn't it, Naman? It's more like giving light to a blind person at the end of the day, if it all works out well. So in your postdoc, did you continue on these lines, or did you do different things?
So my postdoc is another different kind of story, and I think that's also I want to give a little message to the next generation of people, like when they do postdocs. My postdoc was in a very different area. Again, it so happened for some reasons that I landed up in a city where there was nobody doing retinal prosthesis, there was nobody doing retinal stimulation, and there was nobody actually working on neuroprosthetics. Okay, and then for me it was just because of some personal reasons I had to be there, and then I thought, okay, again it was going back to square one. And for me, what I did was I again did the same thing. I went around, I wrote to a few people who were working in physics and a few people in neuroscience. I told them, this is what I've done for my PhD and I want to do something with you. I just want to have an opportunity to work with you and explore some ideas what I can do here. And from those conversations, I was not having a postdoc position. I just went without having a postdoc position. I went there and then I just started having conversations. They said, well, just come over and spend some time in our labs. That's okay. So, and that's what I did. So there was this semiconductor physics lab. They were working on nano electrodes for various sorts of applications. The PI was very happy for me to spend some time there. I was not seeking money. I was truly seeking opportunity to work, to engage myself in research. So I went there, I started looking at what they're doing, what kind of devices they are having. And then again, I had this idea that, probably I could do this. If not for retina, I could just try to, let's put some tissue on, neurons on these devices and see how neurons actually sense their electrical signals, just to stimulate some neurons. Can we use these devices to stimulate neurons? And from there, my postdoc work started. So I did some proof of concept experiments as a research assistant. And these proof of concept experiments turned out to be really well. Like I could use normal nanowire based devices to stimulate neurons, to grow neurons, to grow neurons from rat brains, in rodent brains, and to actually stimulate them. And once I did show that experiment, once I could show that experiment, then everybody around me was very excited, and they were like, yeah, you should take up this postdoc position that we have, and do this work. It sounds very exciting, and so on. So that's how that started. So my postdoc work and my PhD work are not connected at all. And again, when I look back, I think that is a very valuable experience to have. So now, I have worked in two very different areas, and I can use that in my career now.
So do you, in your position now in IISc, are you putting these two things together, or are you starting again something totally new that you had in your mind that you want to do, or what are your present plans?
Okay, so I think what I am excited about is being a faculty. It gives you a lot of freedom to do what you want to do. So I'm going to start the research from where I left during my postdoc, and just I'm very open to what comes up. I'm very open to what students bring. So as in my case, I was bringing up new ideas for my supervisor, and I'm really looking forward to my students bringing those ideas to me as well. So I see myself providing them the training for this kind of research, but I'm just encouraging my students to think out of the box, to bring in new ideas, and just see what we can do. So I'm really open to what is going to come up in my lab.
Also, just taking a step back, I mean, when you had initially mentioned that you didn't really realize initially how there was this mismatch of I don't know, gender ratios when you start with the science fields, and then when you mentioned that when you went to your postdoc is when you started to see this stark differences. So how was that like when you were at, I think, ANU? How did this come about, and did that actually affect how your research directions were designed, or did you how did you sort of design your path further?
Yeah, I think when moving to a new country, that is what I meant. It was not specific to ANU, but it was about, moving to a new country. You actually realize that people have unconscious biases towards a particular skin color, towards a particular accent, towards a particular university, towards a particular education system, and for me that was an eye-opener. I did not think that exists before I actually experienced it myself. So for me that was daunting. And people make statements, like some people can be as bold as they can make statements in front of you, and that's something you have to face when you go to a new country. The other thing was, for me, that is one unconscious bias. The other one is that you are an early career researcher when you're going for a postdoc. So as an early career researcher, some people may not take you very seriously. Anything you make a statement in a committee meeting or anything, you are always going to be this junior person. They've made some statement, and that may not be taken seriously because you are an early career. You've just finished your PhD.
Yeah.
The third one was being a girl. Okay, so then that itself is an unconscious bias with gender. Okay, that if there is a man that has produced 10 papers in PhD and a girl who has produced 10 papers in PhD, and you applying for a 3-year postdoc position, I quickly realized that they feel that the male applications have better stability. There are these unconscious biases that happen there. And for me, it was a mix of going to a new country and also going for a postdoc and then spending many years there.
Also, the other thing I was curious in this regard was, JNC seems to be a really ideal place in these aspects. You didn't see much of it, but when you were in Australia, again, you were doing things of different kinds. I'm sure you'll have collaborations with departments of completely different departments. Did you see that typically in bio neuro stuff, women are larger in number, whereas in
True.
physics and mathematics and stuff, like male are larger in number. And you have done things which connect all these things. Did you explicitly come across situations where you see a stark difference, or
Yeah. So, you would feel like that's absolutely true. In biology departments, the number of females is much larger, and in physics and engineering, it is less. So in my case, what I experienced actually was a little bit different. So what I experienced was, because I wanted to bridge physics and engineering to biology, I got a lot more support in physics and engineering departments. They were my biggest supporters. Okay, but because I was bringing new techniques and new disciplines into biology, into neuroscience, the neuroscientists never liked it.
oh,
So for me, I think for me, the complication was that I was doing this bridging. If I was actually a true neuroscientist, and
Yeah.
I was well enough, I was well off in that department, right? But for me, it was always about fighting for my ideas, fighting for my research, fighting for what I want to do. So that was a constant battle.
So did you ever feel that why am I doing this in between thing all the time? As compared to, I'm sure you'll have friends who are actually doing either strongly physics or strongly biology, and sticking to one field and doing confidently, whereas you were always in the middle. Did it bother you
Yes, at many times it did, and as I've started saying earlier, it has been hard. Another thing is also that you have to communicate to different kinds of people. You have to sometimes defend your ideas, and then sometimes you are talking to biologists, you have to talk in a different language. Sometimes when you're talking to physicists, you talk in a different language. And a lot of students don't feel confident in working with you because they do not want to go down this hard path. They are happy doing a conventional research, and they're happy just going to a well-established lab who's been making field effect transistors for 25 years, because they know that will get done. So for me, it has been really hard to get good students, very motivated students, to fight for my ideas and everything. It has definitely been hard, but somewhere down my heart, I knew that, through my research, I can definitely make a difference to the society. And it will pay off. I just had that belief that it will pay off. At the end of the day, when I look back, I should be proud of what I did. And that's it. So, yeah.
So just picking up from your last point, you said you are you have the open mind to listen from your students and see what they have to bring to your lab. This is also pretty rare, because typically in labs, the bosses or the PIs, they tell you what to do, and anything beyond that scope is like, okay, just do what I tell you thing. It's also interesting that the approach in your lab is going to be where you equip them with skills, but ideas come from students. It's more of it's quite a nice approach that you give them all that they want, but the actual idea, which is actually what is to do research, is something their own. In this aspect, are you I just want to ask a question which would benefit students listening to this podcast in general. Are you what kind of students would you encourage to join your lab in terms of, like, should they be physicists, biologists, or should they be engineers, or what benefits you the most?
Yeah. So as I've put always in my advertisements for PhD positions or interns is a background in any of the fields that you mentioned is okay, as long as they have the motivation to learn another field. So if you're coming from a physics background, write to me only if you have the motivation and excitement to learn neuroscience. And if you're coming from a cell biology background, write to me if you're ready to learn electrical engineering. So I'm open to any kinds of backgrounds that students are coming from. So I've got 4 students now, for example. One comes from electronics engineering, one is physics, one is biomedical engineering, and one comes from cell biology.
Okay.
So my lab is already very interdisciplinary, and I'm very open to getting more students from different backgrounds. And I see my lab, all the students have to work with each other. So they have to talk to each other. They have to, they have to be ready for it.
It must be quite a tough task to make these people talk to each other, right? Because they really have different approaches. Like,
yes, and I think that is the fun part, right? I mean, for me, that always is fun, because then you can bring in new ideas. You have this different line of thought, then you think something differently, and something out of the box just comes out.
So, in just following up on your perspective on the student community, I mean, it's just a political question. You have seen the kind of support and the atmosphere in Australia or other parts of the globe for the kind of research that you do, and how does it compare with India? I mean, because what you're doing is something really useful. It's not something that it might be useful after 50 years, no. But if there is a product based on your research, it can be immediately helpful. So do you, how does it compare India and abroad?
Are you talking about the translation of your research from
No, the support, the support that you get
for PhD?
No, for your research, for the funding of the lab, and for your ideas.
Yeah.
This aspect of it.
Okay, so I can be, if I'm honestly speaking, I can compare only India and Australia. And what I have noticed is that the Australian PhDs are much shorter. Okay, so that actually impacts the quality of PhD. I would still say that Indian PhDs in good research institutions like JNCSR, IISc, IISERs, or even IITs, I would still say that they are better PhD candidates, better PhD quality. The quality of work here in these institutions, PhD, is still better. And the reason I figured out was the time duration of the PhD. So if you have a 3.5 years PhD duration, the first 6 months or 1 year just goes in making up a project, making up a research question, making milestones, writing your research aims, and probably getting trained in the skills. Okay, then you're only left with 2.5 years. Okay, so 2.5 years, 6 months would only go in your writing your thesis. Okay, yes, there is no coursework or anything, but you've spent 1 year getting settled into a new country, getting settled into a new place, getting your PhD aims and objectives clear. Okay, so you only left with 2 years of productive work, probably, more or less. Okay, give and take your even if you take out any holidays or visit back to your home, it's less than 2 years. And the amount of research, true research, that you can do in 2 years is very, very, very less. So what ends up happening in Australian PhDs, or even I could say in Western countries where PhD are very short, I believe that there is a lot of input given by the supervisors. Okay, the students don't have enough time to get these out of the box ideas, and if I want to try this, there's no time to try something different from your aims and objectives. So the PhD is extremely structured. Okay, the students have got at the end of their training, what I have seen is compared to Indian PhDs, abroad the PhDs are very, very structured. They get trained, and you have aims and objectives, you'll meet those. But in Indian PhD, students have this freedom of trying out different things because they have more time.
Mm.
Okay, you can try something different. Okay, your supervisor has given you this and this to do, but in the labs I've seen Indian PhD students will try some XYZ experiment, some fun experiment. Oh, let me do this tonight. I'm just here in the lab, let me try something different. I think that's very valuable. I mean, if research should not be my opinion, research should not be very structured. There should be a lot of freedom to explore the different things. That's when the best ideas come. So in my opinion, I still believe that Indian PhDs or PhDs which have more time are better. Of course, in terms of the money, in terms of the finances, Western world definitely has more support. They have more equipment. They have better, probably access to funding is easier. Okay, but what I wanted to say was that India is picking up. There is if there is a lot of talent, then we can always source funding. So it is not that it's not those 20 years ago how much equipment we had. We have one of the world's best equipment now in our research institutions. So funding is not a limitation in India anymore.
So it's quite an encouraging statement for people who are looking up to PhD positions, that you can actually do wonderful things even in India, and there's no need of really looking out.
Yeah, and I really want to put that idea out there because I see that a lot of students have that mindset. You do your masters, you go abroad, and you do your masters, you go abroad. But there may not be always advantageous. Just for the sake of going abroad, you may not land up with a very good supervisor. You may not land up with a very good research problem. So for me, I think if I want to give a message to the students, I would say, go for a very good research problem that excites you. Go for a very good supervisor, a nice lab with decent amount of funding support, and then decide where it is. Okay, then look at where in geographical location, where is its geographical location. If it's in India, go for it. Okay, I mean we are now producing papers and research that is matching some of the best labs in the world. So if it's in India, don't get daunted by it. Just go with what excites you the most. What do you want to do for research, and select a good supervisor.
You actually. I wanted to ask you for a message, and you said it yourself to sum up the conversation. But if I have to pick some of the leaves from your book, then I would say that you had early interests that you stuck to and pursued it all along, and you haven't left it. And I don't think you will. You're sticking on to your interests from childhood for your career, and you navigated through various barriers of combining different subjects, and then always staying in the spot where you bridge various things and bringing different fields together. And you have a lab which is open to listening to people and their ideas if they have something exciting. So that's what I take. And Naman, if you have more questions, sure.
No, I mean there were so many things that came up, but then of course with the limited time, this is, I think, this amazing ideas that we thought. And yes, I mean we already had so many ideas when Dhavala and I were discussing about the conversation and how we would want to ask so many questions, but then this was already more than what we imagined we could have.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you so much for these ideas, and thank you so much for sharing these so patiently with us. It was amazing to hear. And of course, I mean, the excitements that come along with the kind of ideas that you share are into it. So we are definitely looking forward to things that come up.
Thank you so much for the discussion. I really enjoyed talking to you all.
Thank you.
And yeah.